Behind any impressive achievement, there are often significant sacrifices, sometimes quite literally. In the case of China's industrial development, its citizens pay with their health and lives. And we're not talking about potential human rights violations. We're talking about something as basic as dirty air. Why has the incredible growth of industry and production become the leading cause of lung cancer deaths in China? And why is coal and smog to blame for all of this? Let's get started. Did you know that air pollution is among the top 3 causes of death worldwide? It falls behind cancer and heart diseases, but dirty air slowly deteriorates the body, and the direct impact often goes unnoticed. It's partially responsible for both cancer-related and heart-related deaths. Do you know how many people died in China due to dirty air? From 2000 to 2016, it was more than 30 million, and still up to 2 million people continue to die annually. The rest lose about 3 to 5 years of life. When we say dirty air, it's important to specify what we mean. The main pollutants are carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, sulfur and nitrogen oxides, volatile organic compounds, and solid particles PM. There are 2 groups, PM10 and PM2.5, with the latter being more dangerous. If the concentration of PM2.5 is high, the body may respond immediately with shortness of breath, cardiac arrhythmia, and hypoxia. However, their influence often goes unnoticed, and the effects accumulate over time. Cardiovascular and respiratory systems suffer, and among the long-term consequences is a decline in cognitive abilities. The main component of Chinese smog is PM2.5. Comparing Chinese and European data reveals a dramatic difference. The World Health Organization recommends that the average annual level should not exceed 10 micrograms per cubic meter, and the daily limit is 25 micrograms per cubic meter. In the dirtiest year 2013, the annual average in Beijing was 170 micrograms per cubic meter, which is 17 times higher than the norm. In Shanghai, it was 91 micrograms per cubic meter. The average for China was 52 micrograms per cubic meter. For comparison, here are the data for European cities in 2013. Paris, 20.45, Berlin, 1638, London, 16, Oslo, 10.82, Stockholm, 5.5. But was there ever clean air in China? It's hard to say. Beijing only started publishing official statistics in 2013. But how did China end up here? And why are its people paying for it with their lives? Perhaps we know the answer. After World War II, China was a country with destroyed infrastructure and a backward economy. It wasn't until 1952 that the country managed to reach pre-war levels of development. The economy then progressed based on 5-year plans. The first plan, 1953 to 1957, was drawn up with the help of Soviet economists and aimed at accelerated modernization and industrialization. Thousands of enterprises and mines were built. However, things didn't go so smoothly afterward. The period of 1959 to 1961 led to mass famine, resulting in the death of 10 to 45 million people. Then Mao Zedong fell out with the Soviet Union, and Soviet advisors were withdrawn, along with financial aid. This triggered an economic crisis in the country. Only the beginning of the 1970s, the situation managed to stabilize. But then Mao Zedong died, and a new period began. In 1978, the country's leader Deng Xiaoping announced a course of economic reforms known as the Reform and Opening Up Policy. The goal of the reformers was to modernize the Chinese economy and integrate the country into the global market. Officially, these reforms continue to this day. This raises the question, what is critically important for any economy? Electricity. In the 1960s and 1970s, almost the entire world generated electricity by burning coal. However, while developed countries were building nuclear reactors and exploring renewable energy sources, coal remained the only viable option for China. In 1965, 88% of all electricity in China was produced by coal-fired power plants. By 1978, this figure was 71%, not because of a shift away from coal. Mainly, this was due to the development of transportation and the increased consumption of oil products in the country's energy sector. But this was just the beginning. Until the 1990s, the Chinese economy was developing on planned principles. Understanding that this approach was hindering progress in the early 1990s, Deng Xiaoping and the party finally transitioned China to a market economy. After 1992, there was mass privatization of existing industrial enterprises and the construction of new ones. This immediately had the expected effect. From 1995 to 2009, China's GDP grew on average by almost 10% annually. And of course, such development required a huge amount of electrical energy. This is confirmed by the graph of coal consumption in China. From 1990 to 2021, it has increased 4 times, from 1 billion to 4 billion metric tons of coal. Since 2011, China consumes more coal than the rest of the world combined. But it's important to understand that the country's industrial growth is still ongoing, spanning all sectors of the economy, industry, transportation, construction, and others. Therefore, China's energy consumption in absolute numbers is constantly growing, and even attempts to switch to other types of energy sources do not reduce it. Currently, China is building a significant number of new coal-fired power plants. In 2021, about 176 gigawatts of coal capacity were being constructed worldwide, and more than half of these projects are within China, both domestically and internationally. In 2021, coal consumption increased by 5.2% compared to 2020. In 2020, there was a 4 billion ton increase compared to 2019. Furthermore, this figure is expected to keep rising in the next few years. By the end of 2021, China announced an increase in its domestic coal production in the provinces of Shaanxi and Inner Mongolia by 500 million tons. So what's wrong with coal and coal-fired power plants in general? The thing is, it's the dirtiest way of generating energy among all possible methods. Despite all its benefits, most countries recognize the harm caused by coal and are closing existing coal-fired power plants, as well as canceling the construction of new ones. However, Asia, led by China, has no plans to abandon coal because of efficiency and cost. Coal remains the cheapest and one of the most effective forms of fossil fuel. In terms of the amount of potentially generated electricity per unit area, it is unrivaled and can generate 40 to 50 times more energy than solar cells or wind turbines. For China, with its ambitions and plans, cost will be the main factor for a long time. Therefore, coal-fired power plants will continue to pollute the Chinese air. The only question is how severely and for how long. Only after 2013, which China labeled as the air apocalypse due to the level of air pollution, did the country begin implementing plans for updating its coal industry. A war against air pollution was also declared. As of 2022, according to Chinese authorities, more than 80% of the old power plants had been upgraded and equipped with modern purification and filtration systems, although they still cannot guarantee a 100% absence of emissions, and it's unclear what will happen with the remaining 20%. Additionally, between 2016 and 2021, China made the following commitments to the global community regarding climate issues. By 2030, the country will reach its peak carbon dioxide emissions level. China promises to become carbon neutral by 2060. Today, the country is a global leader in investments and growth rates in alternative energy sources. China produces nearly a quarter of the world's wind energy and hosts 2/3 of the global solar energy production capacity. China is also developing nuclear energy. The country has 53 nuclear reactors, second only to France and the United States in terms of capacity. Since 2014, when Premier Li Keqiang declared war on air pollution, satellite data indicates a 40% reduction in emissions in the country. In Beijing, the air has become 50 to 60% cleaner. The most dramatic aspect of this situation is that the point of no return has long been passed. More than 30 million people have died directly from causes related to dirty air between 2000 and 2016 alone. According to some estimates, up to 4,000 people continue to die daily in China, with the rest living at least 3 years less than they could due to pollution-related issues. Do you think the Chinese authorities are doing enough to solve the catastrophic problem of air pollution? Share your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. See you later.